Goldman Sachs just became the single largest disclosed holder of XRP spot ETFs. $153 million in exposure. And they're not alone. $1.4 billion has now poured into XRP ETFs since launch, making it one of the strongest crypto ETF debuts in history. Meanwhile, Ripple just locked down an Australian financial services license, bringing their total to over 75 regulatory licenses worldwide. And CEO Brad Garlinghouse just finished a 3-continent tour basically telling everyone, XRP is at the center of everything we build. So let's break down what's actually happening here. Okay, so let's start with the regulatory play because, honestly, this is the part of Ripple's strategy that doesn't get enough attention. Today, March 11th, Ripple announced they're securing an Australian financial services license, an AFSL, and they're doing it through the acquisition of BC Payments Australia. Now, why does this matter? Because Australia isn't some small market. It's one of the most important financial hubs in all of Asia Pacific. And with this license, Ripple Payments can now manage the full life cycle of a transaction in Australia, from onboarding and compliance, through funding, FX, liquidity management, all the way to final payout. All of it. One integration. Traditional banking rails and digital assets on a single platform. Fiona Murray, Ripple's managing director for Asia Pacific, put it this way, quote, "Licensing is fundamental to Ripple's strategy, ensuring we can deliver secure, compliant solutions to customers worldwide. Australia is a key market for Ripple, and an AFSL strengthens our ability to scale Ripple payments across the region." End quote. And here's the number that jumped out at me. Ripple's APAC payments volume nearly doubled year on year in 2025. Doubled. They're already working with Australian companies like Flash Payments, Independent Reserve, Caleb and Brown, Stables, and Novati Group. This isn't a pilot program. This is production-grade infrastructure that's scaling. But zoom out, and the bigger picture is even more impressive. With this license, Ripple now has more than 75 regulatory licenses around the world. 75. That makes them one of the most licensed crypto companies on the planet. And few other digital asset companies even come close to that level of regulatory oversight. They're also actively participating in Project Acacia, which is led by the Reserve Bank of Australia and the Digital Finance Cooperative Research Center. So Ripple isn't just getting licensed, they're literally sitting at the table with central bankers helping shape the future of digital asset regulation in the region. Now, some people will say, okay, it's just another license. But think about what 75 licenses actually means. Every single one of those is a market where Ripple can operate legally, compliantly, at scale. While most crypto companies are still trying to figure out how to get one license in one jurisdiction, Ripple's building a global regulated network, and that moat gets wider every single quarter. So Ripple's got the licenses, but what exactly are they building with all that regulatory access? Well, CEO Brad Garlinghouse just gave us a pretty clear answer. He posted about a 5-day, 3-continent leadership tour, hitting Dublin, London, Singapore, and Sydney with Ripple President Monica Long and the executive team. And the quote that stood out most? Quote, "There's a huge opportunity ahead, and we are making sure XRP is at the center of it." End quote. Not maybe, not exploring, making sure. Now here's what makes this bigger than just the CEO doing a press tour. During these visits, Garlinghouse met with employees who joined through 5 different acquisitions: G Treasury, Hidden Road, Rail, Palisade, and Solvexia. Think about what that means. Ripple isn't just a payments company anymore. With G Treasury, they got AI-powered treasury management. Hidden Road gives them prime brokerage. Palisade and Solvexia bring enterprise financial operations technology. Garlinghouse laid out Ripple's four strategic pillars: payments, custody, liquidity, and treasury management. And XRP and RLUSD, their stablecoin, underpin all of it. He literally said, quote, XRP is the North Star for Ripple. XRP sits at the center of everything Ripple does. XRP is the heartbeat of Ripple. End quote. Three separate statements, all saying the same thing. But here's where it gets really interesting. Garlinghouse specifically called out AI integration, saying, quote, AI is becoming a fundamental part of our products, especially in cash forecasting and liquidity management in real time for the office of the CFO, end quote. So they're not just targeting crypto traders, they're targeting chief financial officers at major corporations. That's a completely different market. And he dropped this gem about company strategy. Quote, adoption doesn't happen overnight. Platforms greater than point solutions. Meet customers where they are, not where they might be in a couple of years. End quote. That's Ripple saying, we're not building for the crypto native crowd. We're building for institutions that need the infrastructure to work today. Now, the skeptics will point out that XRP's price hasn't exactly reflected all this institutional building. And that's fair. But if you look at what Ripple is actually assembling, 75 plus licenses, 5 strategic acquisitions, 4 infrastructure pillars, AI-powered treasury tools, a stablecoin, and XRP at the center of all of it, the question isn't whether they're building something real. It's whether the market has caught up to what's being built. And that brings us to the money. Because while Ripple is building the infrastructure, Wall Street is voting with their wallets. XRP spot ETFs have now attracted $1.4 billion in cumulative inflows since launch. And that makes them one of the strongest crypto ETF debuts in history. But the headline number isn't even the most impressive part. Goldman Sachs is now the single largest disclosed holder of spot XRP ETFs. $153 million in exposure. When Goldman Sachs puts $153 million into something, every other institution on Wall Street takes notice. Bitwise's XRP ETF alone has $289 million in assets under management, topping all U.S. spot XRP funds. Across all 5 XRP ETFs combined, $1.08 billion in AUM, and they're still pulling in $10 million a week in new inflows. That's not a launch spike that faded. That's sustained institutional demand. And here's what's really telling. February 2026 alone saw $58 million in net inflows, and that was during a choppy market. XRP was trading around $1.38, down from higher levels, and the institutions kept buying. Analysts are calling them institutional superfans, investors who are completely undeterred by short-term price swings. What draws them in? 3 things. Regulatory oversight. These ETFs operate within familiar SEC-regulated frameworks. Transparent custody. Institutions know exactly where their XRP is. And portfolio integration. They can add XRP exposure through the same brokerage accounts they use for everything else. No wallets, no keys, no seed phrases. Just regulated exposure through traditional rails. Now the irony isn't lost on me. XRP, a digital asset built for cross-border payments, is being adopted by institutions through the most traditional financial vehicle imaginable, an exchange-traded fund. But honestly, that's exactly how institutional adoption was always going to work. You meet the institutions where they are. And when you connect the dots across all three stories today, it paints a pretty clear picture. Ripple has 75 plus regulatory licenses and just added Australia. They've assembled a full stack financial infrastructure with XRP at the center. And Wall Street is backing it with $1.4 billion in ETF inflows, led by Goldman Sachs. That's not speculation, that's convergence. So here's the thing that keeps hitting me. Most people in crypto are still debating whether XRP is a good trade. But Ripple isn't playing that game anymore. They're playing the infrastructure game. 75 regulatory licenses across the globe, a full stack platform covering payments, custody, liquidity, and treasury management. AI-powered tools targeting CFOs at major corporations, a stablecoin in RLUSD, and now $1.4 billion from institutions like Goldman Sachs flowing into XRP ETFs. This is what institutional adoption actually looks like. Not flashy announcements, not token launches. Licenses, acquisitions, infrastructure, and ETF inflows. Quietly, relentlessly, one market at a time. The question isn't whether Ripple is building something real, it's whether you noticed before everyone else did. If this breakdown helped you see what Ripple is actually building, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment. Do you think Ripple has the most complete crypto infrastructure play in the market right now? I read every single one. See you in the next one.